What we are looking at right now is new charges that have been brought against Donald Trump. Him and 18 of his allies have been indicted in Georgia for their efforts to overthrow the 2020 election. Trump lost the state. He lost the election. That is blatantly obvious to anybody who has even a modicum of honesty. He lost. He then tried to contact people, the Georgian Republican Secretary of State, to find enough votes for him to win. He was recorded. He doesn't even deny that it was him. He tried to use his influence as president to keep himself as president. He tried to overthrow an election, the very basis of what we're supposed to believe America is. He instigated a campaign of harassment against an election worker. And the person who went after that election worker is now been indicted in this as well. Broke into their house with a gun and tried to force them to change their vote. He tried to persuade Georgian lawmakers to ignore the vote and get a new collection of electoral college electors to make him the winner, despite the fact the voters literally chose the opposite. Combine this with the attempted coup on January 6th, and you have the most open, blatant attempt to subvert the democratic process in the United States since the business plot attempted fascist coup in 1933. And that's a real thing. You can look that up. It was literally fascists almost took over the United States in a coup in 33. Just Google it. You'll find it there. This was a bold-faced attempt to violate what is supposedly the basis of America. This is what the bourgeoisie are mad at, the collective interest of the capitalist class, or the deep state for those who are unable to do a material analysis and always have to resort to conspiracy theories. America is a democracy, invented democracy, did all the things that make America free, and that's how you can tolerate every bad thing that ever happens. But America's the land of the free, the home of the brave. It's a democracy. You have freedom, and you can't ever question anything the troops ever do or anything the government ever does, because if you don't like it, you can get out, because this is the land of the free. Well, what happens if someone who's a raging narcissist like Trump comes along and tries to literally overthrow that? Well, now you have a threat to the only thing it is that you have, the false perception of what you are. And if that breaks down, America doesn't have much of anything to promote to its own citizens as legitimacy. Now, any Marxist would automatically acknowledge that bourgeois democracy is no democracy at all. It's just competing interests within the capitalist class to see who's going to wield the most power for the next 4 years. Anyone who's actually a Marxist would not be complaining or alleging conspiracy that Trump lost. Aside from the fact that he legitimately did lose. Now, the point is calling for the abolishment of the system, not trying to change the person in charge of it. I mean, we've already settled this whole thing about reform or revolution a century ago. It doesn't work. Okay, that's why we literally have a work called reform or revolution. Because reforming doesn't work. It's not the guy in charge. It's never the guy in charge. It's the system. It's how the system works, the internal logic, the internal contradictions that give rise to motion within that system, and tells us how it functions, how it works, what we're going to do, and what we need to do in order to fight it. That is what's being ignored. The fact that first world people don't want to fight. They don't. Why do you think that we keep getting this vote blue no matter who bullshit? Or we turn around and it's the, we're going to do the MAGA communism where we're either going to take over the CPUSA or we're going to vote Trump back in because reform is going to work this time, or whatever it is that it's supposed to accomplish. Because first world people don't want to fight. It's not worth it to them to engage in armed struggle. They're not going to do it. There are small pockets of resistance who are certainly willing to do that. But on a mass level, sorry, they're not willing to do it. You could just buy them off. It's not worth it to them to engage in armed struggle. Now, Trump himself, along with the 18 others who have been indicted, and all 41 counts together, false statements, impersonating a public officer, forgery, filing false documents, influencing witnesses, solicitation of violation of oath by a public officer, election interference, computer trespass, conspiracy to defraud the state, and perjury. So that's a pretty big laundry list of very serious crimes, and that's all being done under RICO. And that would be an organized crime that's being done under racketeering, which is normally something that's been reserved for organized crime, where you take all the individual crimes and are put together into one larger context. And then by being able to see that context, we are able to see the whole picture and then bring down that entire organization, from the smallest thug to the mafioso at the top, etc. And that's what they're trying to do here. The entire attempt to subvert the election in 2020 is being looked at within the amounts of it that are connected to the events that took place in Georgia. And the judge has made it very clear. She wants this to go to trial in 6 months, even though less complicated, situations or cases are being done in much more time. So clearly, she wants this done before the 2024 election, and that's really what this is about. The bourgeoisie, the interests of the capitalist class, have said that they just don't want him anymore. They don't want him running again. He's too unstable. And that's really what it's about. It's about him being unstable. He can't make up his mind about things. He has to have people make decisions for him because he doesn't know anything. He's a complete ignoramus. I mean, he almost dragged us, he could have dragged us into a world war when he killed Qasem Soleimani, the guy, the Iranian general who was fighting ISIS. Trump, being the anti-imperialist, who almost dragged us into a world war by provoking a war with Iran and then helping ISIS at the same time. It's nuts how a guy could essentially just turn an entire blind eye to what the Saudis were doing in Yemen and cheer on Israel as it moved its capital to entirely spite the Palestinian people and still be considered an anti-imperialist. But there are a few things, aspects of this RICO case. One, it's a minimum of 5 years if convicted, a maximum of 20. So, in other words, he could be looking at 20 years in prison, but honestly, given his age, even 5 years is a really long time for someone as old as him. He may not even live long enough to see the end of prison. Like, who knows? And with the RICO case, there are certain aspects to this. If a Republican does take the White House in the next election, A Republican president can't pardon him. They can only do federal crimes. They can't do state crimes. And even if a Republican becomes governor of Georgia, they can't pardon him until he's finished serving his time. So whatever amount of time he gets when he gets convicted, and he's going to get convicted because he's caught dead to rights. I mean, there couldn't be any more evidence against him because of his own blitheringly incompetent behavior. They can't get him off. Now, they might be able to pardon him afterwards, and by then it'll already be too late. And another part of RICO is that the government can freeze the assets of the defendant prior to even going to trial. Now, the reasoning behind this was that that way, because in RICO, in racketeering, it's an organization that's doing it for profit, they can freeze the assets before they can transfer it out, before there's any kind of ruling or hand over to someone else or hide it, etc. So that in the event of a guilty verdict, the assets will be available for permanent seizure, selling off, whatever it is that it happens to be decided with it, and can be ruled a fine upwards of 3 times what the actual, profit from the endeavor was. So that this wasn't particularly a making money scheme. This was an overthrow democracy kind of thing. But I said this before. The bourgeoisie are going to get rid of him because he's incompetent. He is a wild card, but he's an incompetent wild card who doesn't know what he's doing. And whether or not he gets convicted shouldn't really be all that significant to us. We shouldn't be whining, Marxists. We shouldn't be whining that he gets convicted, or really whining that if he doesn't get convicted. Because he's still a representative of the bourgeoisie, whether he gets back into office or not. He's still a representative of the bourgeoisie, and our focus should be getting rid of the system, not the man. Our goal is to understand the contradictions that give motion to that system. And then we understand those contradictions, we undo them, and use that to get rid of the system. The man running it doesn't matter. But yet we keep seeing this from different sections of the so-called left. We're still getting the vote blue no matter who, and we're still getting the MAGA communism, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. We're just getting 2 forms of fascism. We're getting the nice, happy, smiley face with a rainbow and the maybe some nice little, cheap little reforms. You're never going to get the free schooling or the health care. But it's going to be a nice progressive one that likes black people. Of course, the corporations are still going to get everything they want. The rich are still going to get richer. The poor are still going to get poorer. The empire is still going to chug along. The third world is still going to get pounded into the ground for the profits of American companies and for the luxuries of the first world. You turn around and so what? Trump gets back in, or the Republican Party gets in. Okay, so we have it essentially the same thing, but it hates gays. We're really just looking at 2 different types of fascism. And that is what the future of America is right now. It's a choice between 2 different types of fascism. A progressive, forward-thinking one that's going to have a very cosmetic gleam to it that makes it look like it's going forward and will make people happy and make things look positive, and it's going to be better, and there's going to be like a better world and some other complete bullshit, or we're going to get some dystopian looking hellhole through the Republican Party. But really, in the end, the capitalist class is going to win. The proletariat's going to get screwed. And the third world is still going to get pounded for profits. But that's what we're looking at, is these sections of the so-called left cheering on one or another like it's an actual choice. It's not. The question of reform or revolution was decided over a century ago. So why are we having to deal with this again? Why are we even listening to any of this nonsense? Why is it coming up? Because of first worldism. And a lot of people are going to get mad at hearing that, but it is. Is there armed struggle? Are there people, are the masses of the American people willing to take up arms against the government? No. Are they willing to fight to the death to bring about a Marxist revolution in America? Absolutely not. And that's kind of the truth. See, it's not in the interests of first world people to engage in armed struggle. So they are going to look for something else. Like vote blue no matter who, MAGA communism, and choose one of the two fascist futures. That's literally why. That's why this happens here and rarely happens there, and why armed struggle has always been the case in the less developed countries. Why has it always been the more backwards? The less developed countries are the ones who went into revolution, and not the more advanced ones, the more industrialized ones. And Marx had actually predicted. He said it was going to be Germany or Britain that would go into communism, or at least socialism first, and then move on to communism. He was literally wrong. The opposite happened. He also believed that every country would eventually develop up to a point where they were all relatively equal, and then it would simply be a matter of uniting workers across all borders. Well, that didn't happen either. We got rich countries and poor countries. And in fact, the gap between the rich and the poor countries grew astronomically, from 12 to 1 to 72 to 1 between his day and ours. It was said by me, it was said by the LCO, and it was predicted by Prairie Fire. Given the historical patterns, in times of crisis, the advanced countries do not tend towards revolution. They tend towards fascism. Why do you think every time a crisis comes up in the more advanced countries, all of a sudden there's this like fascist movement, or this like pseudo-fascist movement that suddenly pops up? It's not a plot by some shadowy organization. It's the very nature of the privileged position of first world people. Just like when you try to knock down white supremacy, you get like a neo-Nazi resurgence. It's the same kind of reaction. If you try to push forward, you will get a backlash. And the same kind of thing happened when they tried to push civil rights in the 50s and 60s. That's why revolution has always come from the people where revolution was the only solution. I mean, you can get mad at me for saying that all you want. You can call me names all you want. I'm not going to change anything. I've had people throwing insults at me for, almost 15 years for saying and accurately predicting just about everything that's happened. You're going to have to realize that all of these things, all of these trends that have popped up are complete nonsense and are nothing more than the reflection of the reality of the first world. No one is advocating that you do nothing. That's a common lie given against third worldism. We're not saying do nothing. We're saying don't do the very thing that you know doesn't work. And don't try to do the thing that you know people aren't doing anyway. So don't do the thing that you're already not doing, and don't do the thing that you know doesn't work. Organize those who can be organized. go, as Lenin said, into the lower and deeper sections of the proletariat. I know there's a lot of hatred towards the lumpen, the people with the least to lose, those who actually have the most to struggle for, those who are the least off in society. I don't know why Marx ever really would have thought such people wouldn't want to fight, but I think he was wrong on that one too. You can assist Native struggles, you can assist Black struggles. There's all kinds of things you can do out there. But just don't run around claiming that you're doing the revolution. Don't be like loser cringe lords like the New York Maoists and the Austin Red Guards who bought an empty lot, put a trailer in it, and said, "This is our People Wars guerrilla base." They literally did that. And it was cringy. And then they turned out to be cops who all just suddenly quit the project when the government funding shut down, and then mysteriously reappeared when the government funding came back again. Even if you don't want to believe in third worldism, even if you are ideologically wed to the idea that you're the most poor and exploited person in the world, you would at least still, if you have even a shred of integrity, acknowledge that everything that has been done in the advanced countries for the past 100 years has not worked. There has been no revolution in the advanced countries. So whatever has been done didn't work. At the very least, you would have to admit that you need to do something else. At least admit that. At least admit that it didn't work, and new tactics have to be created. New material conditions have to be analyzed, and new theory created along those lines. At the very least, admit that, even if you want to simply deny the material reality of third worldist analysis. All you have to do is be honest, and just at least acknowledge the problem, and try to return to the radical roots of Marxism, of trying to eliminate the system, and not continually going back to this reactionary garbage of reform, whether or not you want to do it with a rainbow flag dropping bombs on the Middle East, or doing it with homophobic screaming while pretending this is about traditional values, or some kind of nonsense like that. If you really are a Marxist, then you really should be looking for something that does work, because clearly what is being done right now isn't working. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.